ADHD and work. So one of the unexpected things about my deep dive into ADHD so far has been in discovering some of the potential cognitive advantages that are actually associated with ADHD. Now, I'll link to more on that below because I ain't gonna lie, some of the conversations that I've been having and some of the stuff that I've learned, it has me wondering whether people like Thomas Edison or Nikola Tesla may have also had ADHD. If you have thoughts on that, do let me know in the comments below. And so I was especially excited to speak with neuro-inclusive design consultant and ADHD coach, Kim Allingham. Kim helps organizations design work cultures and practices that are actually conducive to those with ADHD. And she coaches entrepreneurs and freelancers with ADHD as well. She has a really insightful take on how to think about this that I think you're really gonna wanna hear. So hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and let's dig into this. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. I've been super keen to actually share this conversation with you around ADHD and entrepreneurship in particular. How, why, and when did this journey begin for you? Like what inspired it exactly?
I guess it kind of started a little bit from about 5 years ago. My background was executive search, and when I realized that companies didn't really care maybe as much as people as they should be, it really made me want to change into people strategy and experience design. So a lot of that was about flipping the narrative to be very people first culture. And this was sort of like just before the pandemic. So I hadn't really built it up loans, but I'd had, some success with clients there. But then when I found out I potentially was ADHD, about this time last year, as you know, because you've been sort of learning about it recently as well, it is a minefield of like knowledge of like learning about actually how different we all are and actually how much the workplace fuels or affects us. There were so many ADHDers who flip between job to job, they get fired, they don't feel like they can fit in, and they end up being entrepreneurs. Like I think I posted yesterday, there's like a 300% chance of ADHDers becoming entrepreneurs, and it's not really just because they have an amazing product or idea or because they just want to change the world. It's because they just can't work the way the offices are set up, and really because no one really got them maybe. So I really doubled down on the whole people strategy and experience design to really look at ways where we can actually, I guess, create more awareness for companies, because obviously if people are more aware, then so many people don't know they are ADHD or even dyslexic or autistic, etc. If more companies are aware, they can see the signs. So when there's problems maybe materializing, instead of seeing that person as a problem, is actually, can we understand maybe what's triggering that? And I think it's really important because a lot of entrepreneurs who potentially ADHD, I think they'd thrive better as an entrepreneur, where they want the camaraderie of a team. They want the support function. They want to be able to just do the stuff which they really love. But when you become an entrepreneur, you actually get very diluted. You end up having to do all the things that you potentially are not very good at. And when you have ADHD, you have poor executive, function, which means organization, dealing with finances. So yeah, it became a real big passion point to think, actually, let's really see if we can educate companies a little bit more, but also hopefully then just look at their policies and procedures, look at the way they're advertising to hire people. Because a lot of people will say that they don't apply for jobs because the application process is so long and daunting. You might have 3-4 rounds of interviews. If you ask ADHDers typically, or they'll just go, no, I'm just not bothering. Or, if you've got problem reading, or they just feel like anxious. So they'd rather just not, if people are just doing videos, it's not going to help people who need time to process the questions. So yeah, it's massive. And it kind of made me realize that doing recruitment for 15 years, I just felt like, oh my gosh, I needed to be able to go down another level. I think this is where there's such a high turnover. So yes, that's where the passion came from, really. So it's sort of building on the people strategy and the experience design to really become a little bit more inclusive, not just for ADHDers, but it's for everybody, isn't it? It makes you really think differently about how we all are so unique, really.
Wow. Do you feel like organizations are good at that? I mean, I know you work with solopreneurs a lot as well, and you kind of, as alongside working with organizations, you're working with people on an individual basis as well, in terms of like understanding how to manage the challenges, but also harness their strengths, I guess. Would that be a fair way to describe it? And if so, what would you say the main challenges that individuals and organizations experience in this space?
The challenges really, they vary depending on how long you've been working, what your experience is, what your lack of confidence is, what your abilities are. But what the patterns I see, and I've obviously experienced myself over the last 10 years, is that the challenges are, one of them, not really knowing who you are and not knowing where you fit in. You might have had many years of not feeling good enough, or not feeling intelligent enough, or not feeling, because maybe you're really outspoken and loud, or you don't really think what you have to say is important. So you'll struggle then to articulate what you do. So when you start a business, it's like, you need clarity, don't you? You need to be really clear on what you do and the problems you solve and how you solve them and who for. But often, this is where I guess my shift has been this last year, is that helping ADHD solopreneurs get more work, I needed to set up a coaching program to be able to then get them project sprinter ready, which we call our ADHDers. So yeah, to get that clarity, to understand. So that's a big problem. But it's also that when you haven't got work, we're really good on projects. We go all in, we're like, feel really positive, we're doing the work. But when you haven't got work, your mind just then goes into overthinking. You start then thinking, gosh, well, maybe I'm not that good anyway. And then you're like, get down into this whole, paralysis, where you think, I need to be doing stuff. You can go down, this spiral, and it can be really difficult to get back up. And also when you're trying to market yourself, if you've got fear of rejection, I don't know if you know too much about RSD, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, then posting online is crippling. I used to do a lot more than I do now, thankfully. I used to post and delete all the time. I used to think everybody's judging. And these are big problems where people don't think that actually it's not just about your skills. It's about having the confidence to just be able to talk about what you do. So my big passion is actually trying to showcase these people so we can they've got so many amazing skills. They're like amazing, the minds and the things that they come up with. So it's about actually introducing them to companies to say, look, the reason you've not seen them is because they suffer about getting themselves out there. They don't even really know how good they are. So it's really important that companies are aware of that, and we can help strengthen the confidence of those who do have ADHD.
My mind is exploding here, because I feel like this is one of the things I've been really discovering increasingly. It's just the obviously there's so many strengths which seem to be commonalities for those who actually have ADHD, but this emotional side of actually navigating and experiencing it as well, in terms of how people respond to it, and in terms of like what people's journey through life has been because they've been managing with this without necessarily being able to be aware that it's part of their experience. I'm guessing there's not going to be a catch-all, but what have been some of the tips or some of the strategies that are helpful for people who are experiencing this?
I think it depends what sort of challenges you're having. If you're having insecurity and you don't feel good enough, etc., it's really important to speak to someone. I had a few weeks ago, and this is what sort of sparked task to get launched, is that you feel shame if you're not doing well, or if you feel like you haven't got work on. It's the shame, the emotions that come with that. It makes you you might end up self-sabotaging. You might end up just watching Netflix. You might end up drinking too much. So I think the biggest thing is, like, you have to be very aware of what your mind's saying to you, and actually be prepared to then just message someone and speak up, and actually having a community where you can share those feelings. Because when you're in that headspace of feeling overwhelmed, shame, it doesn't matter what you know, because we're not very good at doing what we know. You have to have other people there who can just have that word with you and go, come on, let's get you back up. Because you need that reminding that, you know, you're doing a good job. You just having a bad day. You know, you haven't had someone email you back. It's RSD. It's a reminder of what potentially could be the reason. And, you know, that whole emotional dysregulation, I think the biggest tip for me was, if you're feeling like maybe, I don't know, you know, if you're having a phone call and something hasn't gone well, or there's just this feeling, you can quite impulsively just say exactly what you think. You know, I think it's really important that whatever you're feeling, to just try not to say anything and just say, I'll get back to you within 24 hours, or I'll email you, because we need time to process our thoughts. Once we've processed them, the outcome will be very similar. What we want to say to the individual for whatever reason is the same, but we say it in a way where it doesn't come from a place of us being quite angry or reactive. We're very much doing it so we can explain our thoughts. So I think sitting on things for 24 hours is probably one of the key things I think we all need to do more of.
In your ebook, one of the things that I heard you mention about is ADHD paralysis. I'm wondering if you can unpack the experience of that a little bit, and also, I guess, yeah, some of the things that might help with it as well.
Yeah, obviously this is not technical advice. This is just my own personal experience. I'd say it's a weird feeling where, you know, where you want to go somewhere and you need to go somewhere and you really want to go somewhere. It's not, you don't even have to like not want to do something. It's like putting your feet in tar. You know, where you just can't move. You just can't get motivated. And then what you do is then you feel bad for not moving quicker. So then you stay stuck even more. It's a real weird feeling. You need to really be able to break. Again, it's about awareness, recognizing when you're in that zone, and being able to really sort of try and create a pattern interrupt, just to force yourself to get out of that state. Because some people can stay in that state for hours, just because you just can't move. But then someone will ring and want you to do something, and because they want you to do something, you'll just do it straight away. It's weird. It's a very surreal kind of feeling. And I think for people who don't get that, they'll just think you're just being lazy. And I think this is where a lot of the stigma comes from with ADHD, is that someone says they're going to do something and they don't. And that's where you have a lot of the arguments. We're like, well, I told you. But sometimes you can get stuck knowing what you need to do and actually physically doing it. And then what normally triggers it is a deadline. And you just have to go, I'm gonna have to move. It's that sudden surge of panic, which we normally thrive off, really.
You mentioned there about the stigma. I mean, one of the phrases I've seen you use is ADHD is not a disorder or a superpower. And obviously there's been a lot of debate and discourse about how to think about ADHD. And you've talked about finding the ADHD sweet spot. I really love that phrase. I wonder, could you speak about how important overcoming some of the myths or the misconceptions around ADHD is to finding that sweet spot?
Like you mentioned before, there's so much debate and conflict really about the whole disorder strengths. And I think the damage is for both parties. You know, there's team strengths who think, well, you know, you look at your strengths and it's a superpower and it's brilliant. But the problem is when those who aren't feeling it, you know, we were talking about those down days when you're feeling a little bit, you're spiraling, it can really make them feel like, again, it's like another level of like not feeling good enough. Like, well, if they're ADHD and they have superpowers, what does that make me? I'm really broken. And then it's the other way around as well. So for people who are really optimistic and want to be able to, you know, see this as, okay, this is part of me and I'm going to use my strengths and focus. If you see it as a disorder, that's just going to set them back. For me, that's how it felt. I don't see it as a disability or disorder. Maybe it's because I'm 42. I've lived a whole life where I didn't know I had ADHD. Well, I think actually, when we actually look at the fact that ADHD is complex, we all suffer completely different, depending on severity of it, how late diagnosed maybe, to your experiences, your support you have. So I see it as a sweet spot, and I think it comes from my perspective, because I see it as a secret weapon, because no one expects us to be good, for one. So we're very much under the radar. but also what you build up in all the years when you're undiagnosed and as an ADHD, you build up a lot of strengths, a lot of resilience. You often have to work 5 times harder to do stuff. We're perfectionists because we want to please, we want to do a good job, we want to be liked. And if you think for years and years of constantly sort of pushing the bar like that little bit further, you only really challenge yourself and learn when things aren't going well. When life's going well, and if you've got A grades all your life, go to university, got a great job, always have great money, no problems, you don't really have to change things. So the benefit is that you think you're building up all that strength, and I see it as a bit of a bow and arrow. So all that strength is like your bow and arrow, but when you aren't diagnosed and you're not aligned, then you're pretty much just shooting arrows all over the place. We're running in the wrong direction. We've got loads of ideas, but we're not doing anything with them. But I really do see, if we find that sweet spot, and I have a bit of a diagram there where, I think that once you've got everything aligned, even if it's like 70%, I think you're there, because not everybody's going to have meds. Not everybody's going to have the support of their family. There's loads of things you're not going to have. But if you get really clear on what you do, on who you are, what your strengths are, really understand what your diet's like, what foods trigger your ADHD, the more you work on your inner work, the closer you get, I think, to being able to manage your ADHD, and not just manage it, really excel on it. So this is why I find that is when it becomes quite powerful. And then you're going to get moments where I had a few weeks ago, I was just burnt out. I wasn't in my sweet spot. But when you know what potentially can trigger you to flip back, I wasn't eating great. I wasn't going out exercising. I'm like, okay, now I can see what I need to do to get back into that spot. So it isn't a disorder or a superpower. It's like a bit like spinning plates, but I really do feel that if you work at that, it is quite powerful. And that's only my perspective. A lot of people probably disagree, but that's how I see it.
No, it's super, super interesting to me. I'm wondering what are some of the ways in which people can imagine someone in the scenario, perhaps having a late diagnosis, I don't know, but trying to make the journey towards finding that sweet spot. How do people sort of self-assess in a way that's going to afford them the opportunity to, I guess, build some of the practices that will enable them to get the best from themselves in that situation at work?
Yeah, there's lots of ways. I'm creating a scorecard. That's going to be one thing I'm going to be focused on, so people can do that really quickly. But I think it's just looking at, even if it's looking at the wheel, but I can obviously send that to you, where it's just like you can kind of score yourself. You can like give yourself like a mark in each one. If you don't take vitamins, don't give yourself the mark. So the more points you have, the more you can sort of see that you're more likely to going to be within your sweet spot. So it's really seeing it as just not one thing that you can do. So if you haven't done any self-development, if you don't really know who you are, you don't know what your strengths are, you can do various things. I think it's not a case of like just giving one example, and often you have to do some things, go back to them, and then try different things. It's very much experimental. One great thing I found is when I did some coaching for about 4 years, my coach got me into strengths coaching. And what was funny is actually when you do the Gallup Strengths Finder, I don't know if you know much about that. Have you done that? So so when she got me to do the assessment, actually now when I see what the results were, ADHD, and it was like typical, like, examples. Actually, it was just totally ADHD. And the bottom of my report was it 34? I can't remember that. It was about 32 or 34, I think, isn't it, strengths? I came up as consistency as being my bottom. Again, very ADHD. So I think even things like that, if people think they might be ADHD or are, looking at strengths personality tests, because it really helps you zone in on what you're good at. And it is important to do that first, and then what you can do is learn to manage or challenge the things that you're not very good at. So we can be consistent, but we need to be really committed to what we're consistent with. So yeah, taking steps, get a coach maybe. That's always quite a good step.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Let me know in the comments. And as ever, subscribe, like the video, hit the notification bell so that you don't miss out on future content, and I will see you soon.